One of the weirdest things that anime fans will say is something like, sure, that character is very strong, but they would be nothing without their ability. Asta of Black Clover without anti-magic would be fodder. Deku is nothing without One For All. But I have not seen a character attacked by this silly statement as much as the Gojo Satoru. Gojo would be nothing without infinity. This is a claim I see everywhere. Twitter, TikTok, and even my YouTube comments. And it is a take that I absolutely cannot stand, and I actually fail to understand why it's used so much.
You stupid bitch, you filthy slut!
It's one of the silliest statements I've seen. Oh, the Chicago Bulls would be nothing without Michael Jordan. While statements like these have a ring of truth to them, it has nothing to do with their relevance. In today's video, I want to discuss both Gojo and his infinity, and debunk one of the most silly statements that is applied to many of his counterparts in shonen. But first, I want to tackle why this claim is silly for basically any character, let alone just Gojo. If Character X didn't have their main ability, then they would be weak, is a claim that can be applied to literally so many characters, not just to Gojo, who I see it used the most on. It's obviously true that if you rob a character of their most important ability, a technique or power that rounds them out as the character everyone knows and love, they are not going to be as strong as they would be without it. Asta without anti-magic would be far weaker and far less useful with his ability to negate magic, though he'd still be incredibly powerful. Without One For All, Deku wouldn't be close to the top hero, but he has several superhuman level feats without using One For All anyways. And Gojo, without infinity, without his inviolability, is going to be significantly less impressive without it, but he's still very powerful. These are all true statements, but stating that is essentially meaningless. Do you know why? Asta has anti-magic, Deku has One For All, and Gojo has infinity. Just deal with it. And I'm sorry, at least Gege went out of his way of making an intricate and really cool ability that made Gojo stand out as a power scaling powerhouse, instead of just giving him a vaguely high power level than other shonen characters. What are we gonna do next? Well, if the Hulk didn't get affected by radiation, then he'd be weak. Goku without ki is weak. Statements like these are not taken seriously because these are characters where the large majority of their power scaling bravado is based purely on things like attack potency, speed, or raw power. It's weird how it's usually only characters with strong abilities or techniques or items that get these weird statements applied to them, and it's not really fair at all. Now that I've gone through both the silliness and hypocrisy of claims such as these, let's attack the heart of the matter and debunk the idea that Gojo is carried by infinity. Now, if you do end up enjoying this video, please do leave a like, comment, and subscribe. You can also follow me on Twitter or join my Discord, both will be linked down below. There are two different claims I want to debunk here. One, that Gojo is carried by infinity, meaning just the neutral infinity, not any of his other techniques built upon it, as this is always what is the first thing that comes to when discussing Gojo's power. Can you even touch Gojo? Can you bypass infinity? And it probably is his greatest ability anyways, but it is contentious. Some people think that Hollow Purple is better than infinity. Some people think that Unlimited Void is better than infinity. You still can't argue that it isn't one of his best abilities. Now, there is an argument to be made that he could be technically carried by infinity if you're comparing him against characters in other series, even though I will show that that is very overplayed and actually probably isn't even true anyways. But if you were just comparing him to characters in his own verse of Jujutsu Kaisen, you can't really argue that he alone is carried by infinity, as it is stated in Jujutsu Kaisen that about 80% of a sorcerer's skill set is determined by their curse technique, meaning that you can argue literally every single Jujutsu sorcerer in the series that has a curse technique is carried by it, because if one single aspect of a character's toolset makes up for 80%, you could quantify that as being quote-unquote carried, but that's part of the issue. Infinity is only one aspect of the Limitless curse technique. If we say that Limitless as a whole is 80% of Gojo's potential, well, there was infinity, blue, red, purple, teleportation, and unlimited void. Infinity would actually only be a fraction of that 80%, meaning that it should actually not be grounds for carrying Gojo. I think that a lot of people don't realize that while infinity is an insurmountable wall for a lot of fictional characters, and even a lot of characters in JJK, it already isn't completely insurmountable. Several different things or characters have been able to bypass it in JJK. Toji's Inverted Spear of Heaven, Miguel's Cursed Whip, Domain Amplification by the Disaster Curses and Sukuna, as well as Domain Expansion Sure Hits. They just completely bypass infinity. Also, spoilers, but Sukuna was able to bypass infinity by cutting through space itself, something that he learned from Maharaga, who adapted to infinity to bypass it. So you can't even really argue that Gojo is carried by infinity because it makes it so that nothing can damage him, even though we've now quite clearly seen that it's not true at all. There are a lot of things that can bypass infinity. But as I said, let's remove infinity from Gojo. Well, I'm sorry, but Gojo is still a god tier within his verse without infinity, as even when the disaster curses were able to use domain amplification to nullify the infinity, Gojo actually just amped his power to make him strong enough to resist it anyways, showing that Gojo's inherent strength is actually very high. Gojo is able to fight Sukuna and swap hands with him, toss him around, and even ragdolling him at points with just hand to hand. This is no scrub that he's doing to. This is 20-finger Sukuna, and Gojo's Limitless is practically doing nothing here, as Sukuna is just using domain amplification to nullify it. Beyond infinity, Gojo has Blue, his ability to manipulate space to pull things closer together, giving him a pseudo-gravity manipulation to his enemies and surroundings. He can even use Blue to pull his opponents closer and slow them down so that he can fight them easier, as well as even using it to surround his fists and make his punches, jabs, and kicks even more powerful. It is stated by his students that when Gojo hits them, it is like they are being hit by a counterforce at the same time, which would produce a devastating effect to its enemies. Satoru even uses the attraction of Blue to pull on himself. That way he can effectively move far faster than his normal speed, which is already incredibly fast. He is stated to be the fastest sorcerer in Jujutsu Kaisen. Gojo also has Red, that is another spatial manipulation that is stated to be twice as powerful as Blue, and instead of pulling, it allows him to push things with incredible force. He has really good control of Red, just as he does Blue, as he can make it move across an entire building while focused on Sukuna so that it can hit him with a delay. Red doesn't even have to be a ranged attack like he used it against Toji, but it can be in close range as Gojo can point his finger like a gun, which worked to a high degree on the King of Curses. Of course, Blue and Red can be combined to make Hollow Purple, which is a mixture of push and pull, and depending on which translation is correct, it actually erases Gojo's opponents. And it's so strong that not even Sukuna's domain amplification could fully nullify it. And that doesn't even include the unlimited Hollow Purple, which instead of a regular, smaller attack, this is like a massive explosion of Hollow Purple, an explosion of space, or possibly an explosion of existence erasure. Then there is Gojo's greatest ability, that is his domain expansion. Within the Unlimited Void, Gojo would be far stronger because of the stat buff, but it's also pretty much a guaranteed win, as his sure hits instills his opponent with countless pieces of information and stun locking them. Unless if you surround yourself in your own domain or some sort of power nullification armor, you're not resisting Unlimited Void, unless if you have a very high degree of mind manipulation resistance, which within JJK, there really isn't anybody that we know of with that kind of resistance. Gojo also has Reverse Curse Technique, which he can use to heal himself, even regenerating body parts that were lopped off by Maharaga. Via the manipulation of spatial coordinates, Gojo can also teleport. And he has access to several other anti-domain techniques like Simple Domain, which nullifies the curse technique within a domain, and he has Falling Blossom Emotion, which raised his curse energy to protect him by weakening the sure hits of Sukuna's Malevolent Shrine. Yeah, these are all abilities that Gojo has, even if you take infinity away from him. Gojo is stated to be both the strongest and fastest sorcerer in Jujutsu Kaisen. He doesn't need infinity to be at the top next to Sukuna. There are so many characters that Gojo would defeat with ease, even if he were stripped of infinity. The disaster curses were essentially amping themselves with a domain amplification, but Gojo just shut off his infinity anyways to fight them. Remember that Toji already had a way to bypass infinity with Inverted Spear of Heaven. He already had the counter. So in that fight, Gojo essentially didn't really even have infinity practically, yet he still whooped him when he awakened. And if Gojo were to now face Prime Toji and he shut off his infinity for the entire fight, it would still probably be a slaughter once again in favor of the Honored One. This completely leaves out Gojo's 6 eyes. This is completely unrelated to his Limitless, and it's actually these 6 eyes that really makes Limitless and therefore infinity what it is. It grants him a much higher control of curse energy and his curse technique and how it works. And these 6 eyes themselves give Gojo access to extrasensory perception, as Toji, who had no curse energy to be sensed, failed to sneak up on Gojo from behind, even when he was just a little boy. Because of these 6 eyes, it actually allows for Gojo to use his abilities so well, and it gives him his notorious nigh infinite stamina, as when he uses up cursed energy, it's as if he's using an infinitesimal amount of it, meaning he can never run out. Gojo without infinity is still at the top of the verse of Jujutsu Kaisen. It just makes him that much harder to fight if he does have it activated, which he does have that ability, so deal with it. Even in cross-verse scenarios, Gojo would still be incredibly tough to fight without infinity, as we now have a lot better speed scaling for him. Kashimo launched electromagnetic waves at a weakened Sukuna, who was able to dodge them. Because these waves travel at the speed of light, people have calculated how fast Sukuna moved to be 2.5 times the speed of light, meaning that Gojo is well into the faster than light speed tier. Even his raw attack potency arguably scales above Yuki, who turned herself into a black hole that would destroy the world, meaning if you go by that meta, Gojo is an FTL character packing planetary punches and has spatial manipulation to boot. Even if someone is far stronger than Gojo, they must land a kill shot on him or else he is healing with RCT. And if his opponent isn't at least close in speed, Gojo can blitz and trap them in the Unlimited Void and attain that guaranteed victory. You can actually argue that Gojo, without Infinity, actually beats current Deku with One for All and all of the other quirks within, including Gear Shift. Now this is the less popular claim I see, and that is that people argue that all of Gojo's abilities are broken, and therefore if you remove the Limitless entirely, that he's weak. Well, one, you're still wrong, and two, take any broken character in fiction, now remove all of their broken abilities, what are we left with? A significantly less broken character. Wow, who could have guessed? But okay, rid Gojo of the Limitless, but that still leaves him with cursed energy and high physical strength, and the other abilities that are not related to his cursed technique. And remember, the 6 eyes is part of his biology, not his cursed technique. So even if you do remove Gojo's cursed technique, you have a sorcerer who's got hands, and can reinforce himself with cursed energy. He would also still have bottomless stamina and his anti-domain techniques. Now, if Gojo were to be completely stripped of his cursed technique, he'd be useless, right? Well, no. A lot of people don't realize this, or they just forget, but after a domain expansion is activated, your cursed technique is burnt out and needs to recharge. During this time, you cannot use your cursed techniques. This happened to Gojo in his fight against Sukuna. Gojo lost the domain clash and could not use his techniques while within the range of Malevolent Shrine. Let's think about this. Gojo has no cursed technique while trapped in the domain of someone who is also supposed to be the strongest in the verse, Sukuna. But Gojo still makes it out alive, using his insane RCT, which does show that Gojo can still heal even if he doesn't have access to the cursed technique, while Sukuna is amped because his domain is activated, and Gojo is nerfed with no technique and focusing on applying RCT to himself. Gojo is still able to go hand to hand with the King of Curses. Put it simply, Gojo with no cursed technique is putting up a better fight against Sukuna than Ryu did, who is one of the greatest Jujutsu sorcerers in history. Ryu, the same guy that gave Yuta a run for his money, but Gojo puts up a better fight against a domain-amped 20-finger Sukuna, and Gojo didn't even have his cursed technique. Even if Gojo lost his cursed technique, he would still be a special grade level sorcerer at the very least. This is because of his high cursed energy levels and output. We can see this when people feel the presence of Gojo Satoru, akin to feeling spiritual pressure from Bleach. His raw power is up at the top tier, which actually could mean that even without his cursed technique, has anywhere from small country level attack potency all the way up to planetary if you believe he scales above Yuki's black hole. This means that if you are logically consistent and take both Gojo and Deku, strip away Deku's quirk factor, and then take away Gojo's cursed technique, well, who would win? I mean, Deku does have several superhuman level feats in My Hero, even when he's not using One for All, including this supersonic speed feat, as well as showing some decent durability feats that amount to only building level. Whereas Gojo, even without his cursed technique, is massively hypersonic at a bare minimum, likely faster than light, and he has small country to planetary attack potency. Take away Gojo's broken spatial hacks and he still whoops on that nerd. He would break Deku over his leg like a glow stick. Hell, you can argue that if Deku kept his quirk factor and all of his quirks within One for All, but still take away the Limitless from Gojo, that Gojo would still win that fight. Or at the very least, he would put up a great fight. Don't forget, we didn't even mention Black Flash, that when Gojo is in the midst of a great fight, he can activate Black Flash. Now, this isn't something on command, it just is something that can happen. And when it happens, it doesn't just make his attack far stronger, but it actually raises his level of power. It can actually restore his power within the fight. But I think I did a good job of showing that Gojo is not necessarily carried by Infinity any more than any character with a strong ability is. Remove Infinity from Gojo and he's still the second strongest in the verse besides Sukuna. Remove his cursed technique and he still puts up a better fight against a much stronger Sukuna than the ancient sorcerer Ryu did. And remember, Ryu actually pressed Yuta when they fought, so the argument of Gojo being carried by Infinity or Limitless inside of Jujutsu Kaisen doesn't really hold any merit. Remember that Yuta has more cursed energy than Gojo, but Yuta himself admits that Gojo is stronger than him. Not that Gojo is stronger than him because of his cursed technique, but because Gojo's usage or output of his cursed energy is just on a completely different level. Even put Gojo in cross-verse scenarios without Infinity. Well, if that character isn't light speed, if they don't have planetary attack potency durability, if they don't have resistance to spatial manipulation or crazy levels of mind resistance to take on the unlimited void, then they are toast. Saying that any character is weaker without their ability or power is just redundant. You don't need to say that they are weaker if you are literally removing something from their power set. Any character is going to obviously not be at full strength if you remove that. Just like how your favorite sports team is not going to be nearly as strong if you remove their best player or players. This claim is really just an annoying cop-out. A lot of the times people make the statement, Gojo is nothing without Infinity, it's often in a power scaling context, usually meaning that they are mad that their favorite character doesn't have a way to actually bypass Infinity, and therefore their character would likely lose to Gojo simply because of that. But I find it interesting that often the same argument could be made the other way around for that very character that they are representing. Well, if that character didn't have their power, they would be weak too. This can then lead to an infinite back and forth, and it's pretty much a fruitless discussion. This type of statement is often used unfairly, and 99% of the time, the person is overrating the ability they are removing, underestimating the rest of the character's abilities, or overestimating the strength of their character they are trying to represent. And it's always weird this is applied to character abilities or their items, like say a sword. If you remove that, then they're weak, but it's never, oh, well, remove speed from the Flash, remove Goku's strength or the Hulk's strength. It's really weird to remove one of the most important aspects of a character. Like, obviously, they're not going to be as strong. But it's never really used for non-abilities or non-items. It's always on abilities or items. But that's my opinion on the subject. Sure, Infinity is a very important aspect of Gojo's toolset, but I don't think it necessarily carries him. He's still more than capable of fighting without Infinity, or even against characters who have direct counters to Infinity. We have seen this on numerous occasions in the series now. Let me know your thoughts on the subject down below. Do you think Gojo is carried by Infinity? Or do you agree with me that Gojo is one of the strongest even without it? Hope you guys did enjoy the video. Leave a like, comment, and subscribe, and also turn on notifications. You can also join the channel to become a member. You can get access to all my videos early and get extra videos every single week. Hope you guys all have an amazing day. Peace out.